What you see here on this slide is a nice diagram that was included in an article by Noon, Maguire and Rolfs in 2011, and this kind of shows those core revenue management processes at the heart of revenue management. So you have distribution channel management, demand modelling, demand forecasting and optimization, as well as setting booking controls as core processes. And then on the outside of that inner circle, you'll see that we have total revenue management, business strategy and interaction with customers, so all related to things that we've just been talking about. On this next slide you'll see an example of a hotel accounting system where we have the centres of the hotel divided into cost centres and revenue centres. This is very important, so we make sure each manager of each department in the hotel is responsible for the revenue and costs of their departments. And so in this example of a hotel, account number 1 would be rooms, account number 2 would be food and beverage, and then our cost centres would be administration and general, where we have the chief accountant, general managers, secretaries, etc. We then would have another cost centre for sales and marketing, one for human resources and one for property operations and maintenance. It's very important to keep all of these cost centres separate, but we have a general term for those and we call those our undistributed costs. And the reason why they're called undistributed costs is because the costs are not assigned or shared by the revenue centres. So normally the rooms department would need to pay for a portion of these undistributed costs, and a portion would need to be allocated to the food and beverage department and maybe some other minor revenue centres. We don't really do this in hotels because it would be very, very time consuming, and we don't really see the need to actually spend time looking at how much of the sales and marketing manager's time was spent on rooms division products versus food and beverage products, etc. However, there is a movement today towards doing something called customer profitability analysis, and if we want to be able to do that, then we do need to think about how we allocate all of these different costs. But again, this is something we're going to talk about in future sessions. So moving on, why do we need to think about implementing revenue management? Well, it's really because we want to manage demand. In a high demand period, we know in tourism businesses we have this peaky demand, so we know that we need to really maximize the revenue opportunity that we have in the high demand period. Because so what we would need to do is really understand what is the demand for the high demand period, the total demand, so that once we know the total demand, if we would like to be able to then pick out those customers that are going to generate the best profit for our business. Also in low demand periods, we also need to understand what is the value that customers are contributing to our business, and it's actually quite different based on the demand period. In a nutshell, what we would like to be able to do is to know in advance how many of our inventory units we can sell at a low price, and know in advance how many of our inventory units we should save because we know there are customers with a high willingness to pay that are going to be coming along sooner or later wanting to buy those premium products. But how many do we need to have available? That's the question. So before we move on and start talking about distribution, I'd just like to clarify that a few definitions are clear for you. The first one is when we talk about distressed inventory, we mean that we're referring to inventory that we forecasted will be unsold. So we then consider if there's no demand for this inventory unit, the value of this inventory unit is 0, therefore we define this as distressed inventory. The second term I would like to clarify with you to make sure it's clear in your mind is I'm going to talk about revenue dilution. Revenue dilution is when we have a customer that has a high willingness to pay but actually manages to buy the product for much less than they were willing to pay, and that's a shame really. The third thing I would like to clarify with you is the term profit erosion. So when I say profit erosion, I'm referring to the fact that sometimes in low demand periods especially, we have to take the profit from those high demand periods that we made in those high demand periods to cover our fixed costs in our low demand periods when we haven't managed to sell enough to break even. And here you'll see on this slide you have an example of a 2-room hotel, and there's a whole exercise based on this 2-room hotel that I've posted a link to in the discussion forum, so please go and have a look at that, because this will give you an example of these 3 very important concepts and how they can impact revenue management. These are very important because we don't have any accounting reports that actually tell us the impact of distressed inventory, of unsold inventory. We don't have any accounting reports that actually tell us how much profit was eroded because of that distressed inventory. And we don't have any accounting reports that tell us how much revenue dilution was created because, for example, we implemented a wrong approach to discounting. So there's no way to actually know these things are happening unless we're aware of it, and unless we're proactively going to think about and reflect on what was the impact of the distressed inventory. Did I create any revenue dilution with my promotions, and has profit erosion occurred, and how could I have avoided that? That's really important for a revenue management manager to think about. So the next slide is looking at the 3 aspects of revenue management that we've talked about so far, just in a nutshell. So on the one hand, we have to create demand. Then we have to think about optimization, maximizing revenue. How can we do that? And the third thing we have to think about is superior service, because we know customer perception is important, customer reviews are important, and can increase the willingness to pay of our future customers. So have a look at those 3 aspects and just reflect upon them, please. So revenue management, we need to forecast demand. We need to think about when are our high demand periods, and then we use different offers and different types of products to actually smooth the demand, so to decrease the demand in those peaky times. But also, one very, very important aspect of revenue management that people often forget is that we also want to increase length of stay. So we want to use the high demand periods to actually increase demand in the shoulder periods. So when I say shoulder periods, I'm talking about the period just before and just after the high demand period. So really what we want to do is to forecast the demand in that very high demand time, and then pick out those customers, if you like, that are going to be prepared to come earlier or stay later in order to increase the demand and the revenue that we generate in our shoulder periods. And the last thing we need to think about, of course, as mentioned before, is business and market intelligence, which we're going to be starting to talk a little bit about today in the course on distribution. So here we see we have our different technology that can help us do better revenue management by collecting that data and analysing that data. Unfortunately, those systems are separate at the moment, so we have a number of different systems collecting data in different ways. As you can see from the slide, we have our business intelligence tools, where we can, maybe from a central reservation system, collect some data. We have reports from central reservation systems. We've got our competitor intelligence, which we can buy in, or we can develop our own. We've got revenue management systems, of course. We've got systems that help us do competitive pricing, really by benchmarking ourselves against our competitors again. And then we have, of course, other business intelligence tools as well. So moving on, the very important thing, I wanted to be very clear to everybody, that revenue management is not about discounting. To simply do discounting across the board doesn't work. It doesn't increase revenue in the short term. It might do on a particular night, but in the long term it really does erode the price that customers are willing to pay. So discounting does not work. Sometimes when we forecast we have a lot of distressed inventory, we might have a tendency to actually discount that heavily. Unfortunately, this causes profit erosion. So, well, the fact that we have distressed inventory causes profit erosion because we don't cover our fixed costs. So, but if we put promotions in place, this causes revenue dilution, but it also causes customers' frames of reference to change. So a frame of reference is that price we have in our mind as consumers as being the fair price. Now, if I see a very, very low price, that causes me then to expect to see that low price again in the future. And that can be very damaging to businesses. Especially because when we go back to our high demand periods and when prices go back up to normal, customers then question the fairness of those high prices and we then lose their trust. And that's really a shame. So if we lose their trust with the way we're pricing our products, all of that effort that we put into place to generate, their feelings of loyalty, etc., are just then really go down the drain. So discounting doesn't really work. So when I'm talking about revenue management, I'm not really talking about discounting, plain old discounting. Now, I'd like you to have a look at the picture of this hotel room that's on the slide. And I'd like you to think about the brand associated with this room. It might be a brand that you currently work for, who knows? The thing is, look at this room. The room has a bed, it has a window. Probably if we were to do a 360 degree of the room, we'd see a TV on the wall. We'd then see a door leading into a bathroom. Now, if we close our eyes and we think about the major brands of hotel, we think about Hyatt, we think about Hilton, we can think about Marriott, we can think about a wide range of hotel brands. The thing is, when we actually picture ourselves in the room of one of these hotel brands, the rooms don't really look different. And what's even more scary today is that, would you be able to tell me if that hotel room is a 5-star hotel room, a 4-star hotel room, or could it actually be a budget hotel room? That's the scary thing, because we have so many different things happening that customers are starting to question the value of the rooms products that we're offering. And that's just in hotels. So think about how that applies to our other tourism products as well. So this is a big cause for concern. So what I'm really referring to is the commoditization of the products. So people thinking, well, a room is a room, therefore I'm just going to look for the lowest price. And that really is a worst case scenario, and that's, if you like, encouraged by the fact customers see some businesses doing deep discounting. So again, not a good thing to do.